Hello everyone, welcome to Broadview. My name is Joseph. We've all seen evidence of UFO encounters and sightings. Though this topic can be controversial, the US government has officially recognized some notable UFO encounters. This is one of them. One such incident occurred in Mexico City in 1975, a place where UFOs are said to appear often. On May 3, 1975, a pilot named Carlos de los Santos was flying a small plane from an airport in Mexico called Lázaro Cárdenas and was returning to Mexico City. He was flying people from Mexico City to Lázaro and was on his way back. His plane was a PA-24 Comanche small civil aircraft produced by the American Piper Aircraft Company, a very small plane with a total of 4 seats. Planes like these very rarely encounter UFOs. He was flying at a relatively low altitude. Now, to give you an idea, the cruising altitude of a Boeing 747 is about 10,000 meters, while the cruising altitude of this aircraft is generally below 3,000 meters. However, 3,000 meters is already well above the clouds, since clouds hover between 600 meters and 2,500 meters. Lázaro Airport was a total of 370 kilometers from Mexico City, so it took about an hour to travel. The weather was very good that day and the plane was in very good condition. The plane had been flying smoothly after takeoff, but when it was about to arrive in Mexico City, Carlos suddenly noticed that there was a disc-shaped object slowly approaching his plane from the left. He described it as an oblong shape, not a perfect circle, about 4 meters in length. It approached his plane, positioned itself above his left wing, and remained floating there. His plane was pretty small and the wings were only about 5 meters long. Carlos wondered if he was hallucinating. In the midst of this encounter, he caught something out of the right corner of his peripheral vision. What he saw was another oblong object, just like the one on his left, slowly approaching and remaining over his right wing. They continued to hover above both wings as if unified to his aircraft. Now Carlos was panicking. Just as he was trying his best to figure out what these things were, he noticed that a third one had suddenly appeared from directly above, and it was rushing over at an incredible speed. Afraid of collision, he reflexively pulled the joystick to avoid it, but it turned out that the joystick was malfunctioning. The craft flew straight towards the plane. At the moment when it was about to collide, it flew beneath it, just under the propeller. Interestingly, Carlos didn't feel any big impact, but he did hear a clang with a slight shake, as though something had made contact to his plane. Carlos wanted to see if the plane was damaged, but when he looked down through the glass, he found that the strange craft was stuck under his plane, and now all 3 objects flew together with him. Now that Carlos had lost his ability to maneuver the plane, he decided to call for help on the ground. Carlos stated who he was, where his plane was, that he had lost control of the plane, and 3 UFOs were surrounding the plane. Not long after Carlos sent the rescue signal, the out-of-control plane began to rise rapidly. Because of the extreme speed of the rise, Carlos was firmly fixed to his chair. In a very short period of time, the plane quickly rose from an altitude of less than 3,000 meters to 4,500 meters. What was really scary was that after the plane reached this altitude, it suddenly stalled and slowly entered freefall. Carlos was terrified and thought he was going to die. But just when Carlos had lost all hope, he suddenly found that the flying objects on both wings had left, and he could once again control his plane. So Carlos immediately grabbed the aircraft's joystick and began to descend rapidly. He said his thinking at the time was that as long as he could find a flat spot, he would land there, as he definitely didn't want to be flying any longer. After the control center contacted Carlos, they decided to let him land in Mexico City, where he was already nearby. But just when Carlos wanted to land, he suddenly found that the landing gear under the plane couldn't be lowered. He wasn't sure if the third disc was still attached to the bottom of his plane. The control center told him to hurry up and check what was wrong. But he replied that he wouldn't. Even if he couldn't get the landing gear to work, he was still going to land. He saw a grass field beside the runway, and he said he was going to land there. The control center immediately blocked the airport and called for emergency rescuers. But just when the plane was about to land on the grass, the landing gear came down by itself. Carlos finally landed smoothly, and he jumped out of the plane before it had even come to a complete stop, running desperately to the rescuers, showing how scared he really was. Since the Mexico City airport was closed at the time, it attracted a large amount of media that immediately spread the story. After Carlos was rescued, he was taken away by the Mexican Air Accident Investigation Agency for investigation. First of all, they checked his physical condition and found that he had no alcohol or drug problems, and his body was really healthy, so the possibility of substance-induced hallucinations was ruled out. Since it wasn't a hallucination, then there were two possibilities. Either he really saw UFOs or he made up the whole story. So did he make it up? Generally speaking, pilots don't want to mention UFOs, because if a pilot says he saw a UFO and there's insufficient evidence, it'll compromise their reputation, and their mental state will be investigated. Being a pilot is a profession that demands a stable mental state. They can't have hallucinations. So something like this could end their careers. Therefore, since Carlos dared to say that he saw a UFO, he likely did experience something. Later, the facts suggested that what Carlos said was true. This is because the personnel of the control center told the accident investigators that when Carlos called for help, they had already found a UFO on their radar, and it was flying close to his plane. At first, they suspected it was another plane, but there shouldn't have been any other planes in that airspace at the time. Later, the UFO made a maneuver that caused the ground control center to immediately realize that this was not a normal aircraft. As the UFO left, the radar showed that it made an emergency turn, suddenly going in the opposite direction. This was something no aircraft could do at the time, so the data from the radar essentially proved that whatever these objects were, they must be a product of non-human technology. They were pretty fortunate to catch this, actually. The only reason why the radar could capture this thing so clearly was because Carlos was so close to the airport. There were many radars around, and they all captured the object from different angles. But strangely, the radar only captured one UFO, not three. Carlos and the three UFOs were in contact for no more than 2 minutes in total. After the news spread from Mexico, the United States learned about it and was very interested. They also sent NASA experts to Mexico to help them uncover the truth. After American experts analyzed the radar data and Carlos's testimony, they came to the conclusion that this was definitely not possible with current flight technology, which indirectly admitted that this was indeed a UFO. After this event, Carlos went home to recuperate. After having returned home for 2 to 3 days, he was driving on the street one day. A black car suddenly blocked his car, and 2 people in black suits and black sunglasses came out. The men threatened him in Portuguese. "Watch what you say," they said, and then they left. Carlos had never been interviewed by any media since then. 30 years after this incident, in about 2010, American media went to interview him, and even then he didn't reveal the whole incident. So why do NASA experts suspect that this is beyond human technology? These craft demonstrated 2 incredible properties. Firstly, according to Carlos's description, 2 of the UFOs had remained floating on his wings. Because it was a very small plane, it wouldn't be as stable as a larger plane, with its wings swaying frequently from side to side. Yet the UFOs managed to consistently float right over the wings, never touching them, all while maintaining a very close proximity to them. In order to maintain such a perfect unity of action, these UFOs must have had particularly sophisticated radar-like systems. Just like modern stabilizers, they must collect data on the state of motion in real time and use it to keep the same state as you. It's a lot harder to do this with an airplane in flight. And in 1975, there was no aircraft capable of such a difficult flight maneuver. Even to this day, no crafts are capable of this. Now, to achieve this, a supercomputer would be needed, but a supercomputer obviously cannot be placed on a 4-meter-long flying saucer. So NASA experts believe that the technical level of these objects far exceed the most sophisticated man-made technology of that time. Secondly, the radar data showed that the UFO moved in ways that defied the laws of physics. Things that go against the laws of physics are still incapable of being created by human technology. So what were these 3 flying discs? There's no official conclusion so far, but in 1975 this event had already become a sensation because Carlos had a most direct and most recent case of contact with UFOs. In fact, many people think that Mexico is one of the countries with the most frequent UFO incidents, and that the place where UFOs are found most often is Popocatépetl volcano. There are often people who see UFOs near the crater there. Some UFOs are seen entering the crater while others are seen exiting it or flying around it. Nearly half of the residents who live nearby have seen UFOs with their own eyes at some point in their lives. Later, many of Mexico's media outlets set up cameras nearby, tracking and filming the area all year round. They captured many images. For example, this object in the picture was caught quickly flying into the crater. A volcano by its very nature is connected to the underground. These UFOs may be able to withstand the temperature of the lava and travel down along the lava to an underground city, perhaps. There's also a theory that the lava is full of thermal energy, and so the flying objects need it to replenish their own energy. There are also UFO sightings on Mount Fuji in Japan, though not as many. Why are UFOs more frequently photographed near active volcanoes? Some people think the reason is because the Popocatépetl volcano is very large. Upon eruption, it would impact the whole world, so aliens may be concerned of it erupting and often monitor it. And this volcano happens to be near the place where Carlos encountered his UFOs, so some people think that the UFOs Carlos encountered came from that place. But what was the reason for their odd interaction with him? They didn't seem to be malicious. It almost seems like they were playing or maybe taunting Carlos. Well, that's all for today's video. What do you think of this UFO incident? Do you think it's true? Have you ever seen what you believe to be a real UFO? Feel free to leave a comment below, and we'll see you next time.